Up, and away with Maya. The shrill cry of Maya's alarm usually felt like a rude awakening, a jarring theft of precious dream time. Yet this morning, it heralded a welcome expedition. A quick tap silenced the noise. No lingering in bed today. An electric current of anticipation coursed through her. Sunlight, fractured by floral curtains, painted the room in vibrant stripes. A satisfying stretch, complete with popping joints, and she bounded out of bed. A catchy Latin tune, recently stuck in her head, escaped her lips as she donned her uniform, a sharp navy skirt, an immaculate white blouse, a scarlet scarf knotted just so. More than mere work attire, it was her personal emblem of competence, a visual declaration of her ability to rise to any occasion. A hasty breakfast of toast and robust coffee propelled her towards LaGuardia. The rhythmic rumble of the airport shuttle, the global chorus of voices, the pungent aroma of aviation fuel, these were the hallmarks of her happy place. Buenos dias, Maya! Javier's voice boomed from behind the check-in counter, where he was managing a stack of boarding passes while simultaneously calming a flustered traveler. Hola, Javier! Looks like you're juggling as usual. Maya responded, her smile radiant. Anything particularly wild brewing today? He feigned exasperation, but a smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. Just the standard controlled chaos. Chicago flight for you, isn't it? Packed to the gills, it seems. Excellent! Maya's enthusiasm was contagious. A busy flight energized her. So many stories waiting to be written, so many opportunities to sprinkle a little joy. The rest of the crew was already assembled near gate B-22. Morning, sunshine! Brenda, the senior flight attendant, greeted her, her silver bouffant gleaming. Ready to take to the skies again? Ready when you are! Maya replied, grabbing her tablet and diving into the passenger manifest. The list presented its usual diverse tapestry: families embarking on holiday, business professionals tethered to their laptops, and college students with bursting backpacks. One name snagged her attention: Sergeant David Lee. A veteran, the notes indicated. She mentally highlighted his seat. He deserved some extra consideration. As boarding neared, a familiar hum of nervous excitement vibrated within her, a characteristic pre-flight cocktail of anticipation and responsibility. Not mere fear, but a focused awareness of the task ahead. She wasn't merely a server of refreshments and demonstrator of safety protocols. She was a guardian of hundreds of lives suspended miles above the earth. A profound privilege, a duty she embraced wholeheartedly. She gazed out at the polished silver fuselage gleaming on the apron, its engines murmuring with dormant potency. All right, everyone, she announced, her tone infused with upbeat command. Let's get these passengers soaring. Sergeant Lee's journey home. Jian Lee folded his last uniform, the worn fabric a stark reminder of the miles he marched and the battles he'd endured. He smoothed out a crease, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Not much longer now. He carefully placed a small, intricately carved wooden elephant, a gift for his daughter, May, in the side pocket of his duffel bag, ensuring it wouldn't get crushed. He zipped the bag shut, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent barracks. He checked the photo of his wife, Lynn, and May taped to the inside of his locker one last time, tracing their smiling faces with his finger. Home. The military transport bus rumbled along the dusty road towards the airfield. Jian stared out the window, watching the landscape blur past. He tried to focus on the future, on barbecues in the backyard, helping May with her homework, and holding Lynn close. But the images were often interrupted by flashes of the past, the deafening roar of explosions, the acrid smell of smoke, the faces of fallen comrades. He pushed them back, willing himself to concentrate on the promise of warmth and normalcy. At the airport, he navigated the crowded terminal with a practiced ease, his military bearing setting him apart from the other travelers. He approached the check-in counter, the bright lights momentarily disorienting. Sergeant Jian Lee, he announced to the attendant, a young woman with tired eyes. He presented his military ID and travel documents. Thank you for your service, Sergeant, she said, her voice a practiced monotone. She tapped away at her keyboard. First class Seat 2A. Enjoy your flight. He managed a small, genuine smile. Thank you? It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. He collected his boarding pass and headed towards security. Boarding the plane felt surreal. After months of cramped quarters and basic amenities, the plush seats and spacious legroom of first class were a shock to the system. He found his seat, 2A, and stowed his duffel bag in the overhead compartment. The scent of leather and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. He sank into the seat, the soft cushion molding to his body. He closed his eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. A flight attendant approached, her smile warm and genuine. Welcome aboard, Sergeant. Can I offer you a pre-flight beverage? Just water, please, he replied, his voice still rough around the edges. He opened his eyes and looked out the window. The tarmac stretched out before him, shimmering in the afternoon sun. He could see the ground crew making their final checks. Soon they would be airborne. Soon he would be home. A knot of anticipation tightened in his stomach. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to Lynn. Almost there. Love you both. He pressed send, a silent prayer escaping his lips for a safe journey and a joyful reunion. A mix-up at the gate. Sergeant Lee shuffled down the narrow first-class aisle, his duffel bag bumping gently against the plush headrests. The scent of leather and expensive cologne hung in the air, a stark contrast to the sterile, metallic tang of the transport planes he was accustomed to. He located seat 2A, a window, just as his ticket indicated. Relief washed over him. After months in the desert, the promise of a comfortable flight home was almost too good to be true. Except there was already someone in his seat. A portly man in a crisp, blue blazer was deeply engrossed in a newspaper, his reading glasses perched precariously on his nose. Lee cleared his throat softly. Excuse me, sir? I believe that's my seat. The man lowered his paper with a sigh. Oh? I have 2A. He gestured to the boarding pass sticking out from his breast pocket. Lee pulled out his own ticket, double-checking the numbers. Yes, sir, this is also 2A. He pointed to the boldly printed numbers. The man frowned, a ripple of annoyance crossing his face. Well, that's just not possible. Perhaps there's been a mistake, Lee suggested, trying to keep his voice even. He hadn't slept well in days, and the last thing he wanted was a confrontation. The man huffed and stood, adjusting his blazer. Let's get this sorted out. Together, they approached the gate agent, a young woman with tired eyes and a headset askew. She listened patiently as the man in the blazer explained the situation, his voice laced with impatience. Sergeant Lee, she said, finally turning to him, her voice apologetic. I'm so sorry, sir. There's been a system error. The flight was overbooked, and your seat was inadvertently reassigned. Lee felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Disappointment, sharp and unexpected, pierced through his weary resolve. He'd envisioned stretching out, closing his eyes, and letting the gentle hum of the engines lull him to sleep. Now. So, he said, his voice flat. I don't have a seat in first class? The gate agent winced. Unfortunately, no, sir. We can offer you a seat in economy, with a voucher for a future upgrade. He looked at the voucher she held out, a small piece of paper that felt flimsy and inadequate in his hand. The crisp newness of it seemed to mock him. He thought of the cramped seats in the back, the crying babies, the jostling elbows. Not that he hadn't endured worse. But after everything. I understand, he said quietly, handing the voucher back. It's all right. But it wasn't all right. It felt like another small indignity, another reminder that even in moments of supposed privilege, he was still just a soldier, easily overlooked, easily forgotten. Maya to the rescue? The gate agent's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she spoke to Sergeant Lee. I understand, Sergeant, but the upgrade list is prioritized by frequent flyer status. We appreciate your service, of course, but... She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the tablet in her hand. Maya, ostensibly engrossed in a magazine, watched the scene unfold. Sergeant Lee stood ramrod straight, his duffel bag at his feet. He nodded, a tight line forming around his mouth. No protest, no argument, just quiet acceptance. The agent's voice, though polite, carried a dismissive edge that pricked at Maya's conscience. He deserved that upgrade. More than deserved it. Maya remembered the news stories, the images flashing across the screen. Sergeant Lee, rescuing civilians from a bombed-out building, his face grimed with soot, his eyes holding a weariness that belied his age. He had risked his life, endured unimaginable horrors, and now he was being denied a small measure of comfort because someone else had accumulated more airline miles. It wasn't right. Maya snapped her magazine shut. She couldn't just stand by and watch. But what could she do? Arguing with the gate agent would be futile. Complaining to the airline would take weeks, maybe months. Sergeant Lee would be back in the trenches before then. An idea sparked, sudden and bright. Impulsive, maybe even a little crazy, but it was the only thing that came to mind. She glanced at her boarding pass. First class. Window seat. A fleeting pang of guilt nipped at her. She had worked hard for that upgrade, spent countless hours on red-eye flights and endured countless crying babies. But Sergeant Lee had earned it more. She approached the gate agent, a disarming smile plastered on her face. "Excuse me," she said, her voice deliberately cheerful. "I was just wondering if it's still possible to change my seat?" The agent looked up, surprised. "Possibly. What are you looking to do?" "Well," Maya hesitated, trying to sound nonchalant. "I have a window seat in first, but I actually prefer the aisle. I was wondering if anyone in coach might be willing to swap." She hoped the agent wouldn't notice the slight tremor in her voice. The agent tapped at her tablet. "Let me see. There's a Mr. Henderson in 22B who requested an aisle. I can offer him an upgrade, but I can't guarantee he'll want to move back to first." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Maybe someone else would be interested in the first-class seat. She glanced subtly at Sergeant Lee, who was now studying a map. The agent followed her gaze, and a flicker of understanding seemed to cross her face. "Let me see what I can do." She picked up the microphone. "Attention passengers, this is an announcement for Flight 347 to Denver. We have a first-class window seat available. Any passengers interested in swapping their coach seat, please approach the gate agent." Maya bit her lip, anticipation and anxiety swirling within her. Would anyone bite? And if they did, how would she explain why she wanted Sergeant Lee to have the seat? This was either going to be a brilliant act of spontaneous generosity or a complete and utter disaster. The crew rest area idea. Maya gnawed on her thumbnail, staring out the small galley window at the endless expanse of cloud. Sergeant Lee deserved better. Cramped in that economy seat, trying to get some rest after whatever hell he'd been through, just didn't seem right. There had to be something she could do. First class was out. Mr. Abernathy seemed determined to hog his space, and the other passengers were unlikely to give up their premium legroom. Maybe she could ask the pilots to let him sit in the cockpit for a bit. Stretch his legs, see the view. But no, security regulations were tighter than a drum these days. That idea wouldn't fly. She sighed, the condensation from her lukewarm coffee fogging the window. It wasn't just about legroom, though. It was about respect. About giving this man, who'd sacrificed so much, a moment of peace. She wandered back into the main cabin, ostensibly to check on drink service, but really just to think. The rhythmic hum of the engines was a constant, a white noise that usually soothed her, but today it felt like a nagging reminder of her helplessness. Then, like a lightning strike, it hit her. The crew rest area. It was tucked away at the back of the plane, a small, windowless compartment with a couple of reclining seats, designed for long-haul flights. On this shorter hop, it was almost always empty. Maya had used it once or twice herself, during particularly grueling shifts. A dark, quiet space to just breathe. Perfect. Her heart quickened. This could work. She pictured Sergeant Lee, stretched out, finally able to relax. No crying babies, no elbows in his ribs, just quiet. But there were hurdles. Regulations, for one. She wasn't supposed to let passengers in there. And then there was the question of asking permission. Captain Reynolds was a stickler for the rules, a man who could find fault in sunshine. Still, what was the harm in asking? She hurried back to the galley, her mind already racing, formulating her pitch. She'd emphasize Sergeant Lee's service, his obvious exhaustion. She'd promised to personally supervise him, ensure he didn't touch anything. She'd pull out all the stops. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her uniform, smoothed her hair, and headed towards the cockpit. She could hear the faint rumble of the pilots' voices, the clipped tones of air traffic control. This was it. Time to put her plan into action. Seeking Captain Olsen's approval. The soft glow of the cockpit bathed Captain Olsen in a serene light, a stark contrast to the whirlwind brewing in Maya's stomach. He was meticulously reviewing pre-flight checklists, his brow furrowed in concentration. The scent of ozone and warm electronics filled the small space. "Captain Olsen?" Maya began, her voice a little shaky. He looked up, a warm smile softening his features. "Everything all right, Maya? We're still a bit out from departure." "Yes, sir, the passengers are all boarded, but there's a situation." She hesitated, gathering her thoughts. "It's about Sergeant Lee." Olsen leaned back in his chair, his expression turning serious. "What's happened?" "He's in 42B, the last row. Sir, it doesn't recline. And he's a decorated veteran. He flew halfway across the world to get here." Maya's voice gained urgency. "He barely fits in the seat, and he really needs to rest." Olsen nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "The last row, huh? Unfortunate. I wasn't aware of the seat malfunction. Maintenance should have flagged it." He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "And you're saying he's taking it in stride?" "He hasn't complained once, sir. But you can see it in his eyes. He's exhausted. He keeps trying to stretch his legs, and he just can't." Maya paused, taking a deep breath. "Sir, I know it's unusual, but is there any way Sergeant Lee could use the crew rest area? Just for a few hours. It's empty, the other crew are sleeping in the hotel. It would mean the world to him." Olsen steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on the instrument panel. The low hum of the plane filled the silence. Maya could feel the tension building, the weight of her request pressing down on her. She knew the rules, the procedures. This was a big ask. Finally, he turned back to her, his eyes meeting hers. "Maya, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I respect Sergeant Lee's service, and I understand your concern. Letting a passenger use the crew rest area is highly irregular, but—" He paused, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "His service to our country deserves more than a broken seat in the back of the plane. See to it that he is settled in comfortably." Relief washed over Maya in a warm wave. "Thank you, Captain Olsen." "Thank you, sir. I promise he won't be any trouble. Just make sure he understands it's temporary, Maya. And that he's awake before we land." Olsen winked. "And maybe find him a decent blanket. It can get a little chilly up there." Maya beamed. "Absolutely, sir. I'll take care of everything." She turned to leave, her step lighter, her heart full. She couldn't wait to tell Sergeant Lee. A captain's compassion. A crease deepened on Captain Olsen's forehead as he scrutinized the pre-flight checklist, the flimsy paper whispering in the still cockpit. Beneath him, the aircraft's engines emitted a deep, familiar thrum, a resonance that usually soothed him. "Not today!" Maya Rodriguez's request, crackling through the intercom, had upset his carefully laid plans. He shot a glance at young Reynolds, feigning indifference in the co-pilot's seat. Olsen suppressed a sigh. Reynolds was undoubtedly all ears. They all were. "All right," he announced into the comm, his tone crisp but not unkind. "Send Ms. Rodriguez forward. Sergeant Lee remains where he is." Moments later, Maya filled the doorway, her customary radiant smile dimmed. Apprehension flickered in her eyes, Olsen observed. As it should be. He didn't treat protocol deviations lightly. Captain Olsen, she began, her voice a threat against the engine's drone. Thank you for granting me this moment. He inclined his head toward the jump seat. Take a seat, Ms. Rodriguez. Enlighten me. Maya perched tentatively, her hands knotted in her lap. She recounted the episode with the first-class passenger, underscoring Sergeant Lee's quiet dignity against the man's outright disrespect. Her words rushed, tripping over themselves in her eagerness to make him understand. Olsen listened, his expression giving nothing away. He recalled his own brief time in the reserves, the kinship, the selflessness, the ever-present awareness of danger for others abroad. He hadn't seen action, but he knew enough to grasp the weight Sergeant Lee carried, the unspoken stories etched into his features. So, he summarized when she paused, you wish to upgrade him to first class. It was less a question than a statement. Maya nodded, her gaze imploring. He deserves that consideration, Captain. More than anyone else on board. Then, she offered her proposition. I'm more than willing to relinquish my seat and work in the galley. He can have my spot. Olsen leaned back, his eyes assessing her. Young, idealistic, and clearly propelled by a powerful sense of right and wrong. A valuable trait in a flight attendant. A potentially problematic one. He pictured Sergeant Lee, likely trying to minimize his presence in economy. He contemplated the years of service, the potential wounds, the quiet bravery it demanded to don a uniform and confront peril. He reached a decision. All right, Ms. Rodriguez, he declared, his voice resolute. Here's how we will proceed. You remain at your station. Reynolds will escort Sergeant Lee to the cockpit. He'll occupy the jump seat for the duration of the flight. It's not first class, but it's a far cry from coach, and it will afford him some room. And inform the other passengers, should anyone voice objections, that he's here under my authority. Maya's face brightened, her smile restored to its full brilliance. Thank you, Captain. I deeply appreciate this. Olsen waved her off. Simply return to your duties, Ms. Rodriguez. And convey my gratitude to Sergeant Lee for his service. Kindness takes flight. Sergeant Lee. Maya called, catching him just before he disappeared into the cramped economy section. He turned, his weary face creasing into a polite, if tired, smile. Could I have a word? He nodded, his movements stiff. The long flight from Ramstein had clearly taken its toll, and the discomfort etched on his features went beyond mere physical fatigue. It was the kind of weariness that settled deep in the bones, a heavy burden carried silently. I spoke with the captain, Maya said, feeling a blush creep up her neck. And well, there's been a slight adjustment to your seating. His brows furrowed slightly. Adjustment? Yes. I know it's not much, but we have a crew rest area on this flight. It's quieter. More comfortable. And frankly, after everything, you deserve it more than anyone else on this plane. Maya held her breath, hoping he wouldn't refuse. He blinked, processing her words. For a moment, she thought he might argue, might insist he was fine where he was, but then his shoulders seemed to slump just a fraction, the weight of his exhaustion momentarily visible. That's incredibly kind of you, Ms. Rodriguez. Maya Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez, he repeated, a hint of a smile finally reaching his eyes. Thank you? More than you know. Maya led him forward, past the galley where the other flight attendants were preparing for the next meal service. She navigated him through a discreet door near the front of the plane, a door most passengers didn't even realize existed. The crew rest area was small, but a haven compared to the crowded cabin. A low bunk stretched along one wall, covered in a thick, plush blanket. Soft, diffused lighting cast a calming glow. A small window offered a sliver of the endless blue sky. The air felt cleaner, quieter somehow. Sergeant Lee stood just inside the doorway, taking it all in. He ran a hand over the blanket, his touch almost reverent. This is amazing. It's not first class, Maya said, feeling a pang of guilt that she couldn't offer him more. He shook his head. First class couldn't compare. Thank you? Really? He looked at her, a genuine warmth in his eyes that made her heart ache. People don't usually do things like this. They should, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper. You've earned it. Get some rest, Sergeant. We'll wake you before landing? He nodded, his gaze already drifting towards the bunk. Thank you, Maya Rodriguez. For seeing me. As she closed the door behind her, Maya felt a lump in her throat. Kindness, she realized, wasn't just a gesture. It was a powerful act of recognition, a validation of someone's worth. And in the cramped space of a long-haul flight, sometimes, kindness could take flight. A hero's welcome home. Maya made a point of checking on Sergeant Lee every hour. She offered him extra water, a warm blanket, and each time, a genuine smile. He always refused the blanket, claiming he was plenty warm enough, but accepted the water with a quiet, "Thank you, ma'am." His eyes, though, told a different story, a weariness that settled deep beneath the surface. As the plane began its descent into Denver, Sergeant Lee unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, facing the passengers. Maya, preparing for landing, paused, a flicker of concern crossing her face. Was he all right? Excuse me, he said, his voice a low rumble that carried surprisingly well through the cabin. I just wanted to say something before we land. A hush fell over the passengers, 100 pairs of eyes fixed on the soldier in the back. He straightened his uniform, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him. I've had a long couple of years. Seen things I wouldn't wish on anyone. He paused, swallowing hard. This flight, though, it's been different. Miss. He turned, acknowledging Maya with a nod. Miss Rodriguez, she's shown me a kindness I haven't seen in a long time. She didn't have to, but she treated me with respect, with dignity, when maybe I didn't expect it. He took a deep breath. She went above and beyond, folks. This woman deserves more than just a thank you from me. She deserves recognition for her heart. A ripple of applause started near the front of the plane and quickly spread, washing over the cabin like a warm wave. Maya felt her cheeks flush, a genuine smile gracing her lips. She ducked her head, embarrassed but deeply touched. This wasn't about her, it was about recognizing basic human decency. The plane bumped gently onto the runway, and the applause died down. Sergeant Lee retrieved his duffel bag from the overhead compartment. As he walked past Maya, he stopped, extending his hand. Thank you, Miss Rodriguez. Truly. She shook his hand, her grip firm. Thank you, Sergeant Lee. For your service. He offered a small, tired smile. I'll make sure people hear about this. About you. You made a difference today. He turned and walked towards the front of the plane, disappearing down the jetway. Maya watched him go, a feeling of quiet fulfillment settling in her chest. The passengers began to disembark, offering her smiles and nods of appreciation. She returned them, her heart lighter than it had been all week. As she resumed her duties, preparing the cabin for the next flight, she knew she had done something right, something good. And in that moment, that was enough.